Would you like to expand your skill set as a craftsman or a creator? Well, we would like to help. Each episode will be focusing in on a different technique in blacksmithing, bladesmithing, and beyond that will give you the edge in your work. This is your edge.
And welcome back to the highly educational and highly anticipated episode of Your Edge, a show where we focus on specific techniques which you wanted to know. Now, today we're focusing on a San Mai kitchen knife. But before we get started, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. Explore new skills, develop your current interests, and get lost in creativity. You can learn just about anything on Skillshare. One of the classes that I personally enjoyed a lot is Illustrating with Ink Techniques for Brush as well as Pen, held by Roman Muradov. Skillshare is giving away 2 free months of premium membership to the first 1,000 people to click the box below and explore their creativity. After that, it's only $10 a month. Whether you're looking to stave off boredom or fill up some of your free time with learning new and creative skills, Skillshare is the place for you. Click on the link below, subscribe, sign up. Well, let's get to making that knife. Today's topic is the San Mai knife construction. The San Mai knife construction is also transferable onto many other projects, which include swords, axes, and so on. San Mai in Japanese literally means 3 layers. It is actually a linguistic term. Now, Gomai means 5 layers, Nimai means 2 layers. Hansan Mai means 3.5 layers and is a separate type of construction. Although the terms for this construction are taken from Japanese, it is actually ubiquitous throughout all cultures, as it is a quick and dirty way of assembling your project. Back in the day, high carbon quality steel was actually fairly hard to come by because not only did it need a precise content of carbon, and the theory of carbon didn't exist yet, it also needed to be made from the proper type of ore that does not crumble, and so on. So, given that high carbon steel, good edge steel, was expensive, but wrought iron, or iron which comes from the bloomery, was relatively ubiquitous. A way of assembling a knife or another blade came about where you coat your thin layer of high carbon steel in wrought iron. And this is exactly what we have here. This is a piece of wrought iron. And what we're going to do, we're going to insert a high carbon bit into it. Traditionally, the high carbon would have come from a bloomery steel like this, but today, to make it more accessible to you, we're going to use simple W1. Now, you see very prominently people assembling their San Mai billets by using a TIG welder all the way around, making sure that the weld is correct and proper. In fact, that is a very bad and improper way of assembling a San Mai knife. The reason being is, in modern times, the old school way of inserting a high carbon bit into a wrought iron jacket is supposed to demonstrate the skill of the craftsman. And when you use modern machinery for an old school technique, what you're actually demonstrating is your lack of skill, or rather how good your machinery is rather than how good you are. And today I'm not going to use any power tools, explaining that this method is actually more pleasurable and very effective when you don't have a $2,000 TIG welder or a $18,000 power hammer. You at home, once you practice, can make San Mai knives all day long and enjoy it. So let's begin. We begin the project by heating up our high carbon steel, in this case, once again, it's W1, and making it into a little insert. Remember, the San Mai knife requires minimal amount of high carbon steel, and the better the skill of the smith, the thinner they can make that little insert. In this video, you'll see me using the charcoal forge throughout the procedure. The charcoal forge is the traditional type of forge used throughout the centuries, as well as providing some advantages. For example, charcoal is basically pure carbon, so it provides the optimal fuel medium for forge welding as well as heat treat. First hot cut. As a matter of habit, I prefer not to leave my forging area throughout the forging session. So, in this case, quenching a piece of high carbon steel and breaking off as much as I need seems to be more efficient than waiting for it to cool off and go into the bandsaw. So, I water forged it a little bit so that it stays clean, which assists with a good forge weld down the road. Now that my insert is done, it's time to work on the wrought iron. Once again, I'll have to heat it up. But the next stage is I will take a hot cut and have someone assist me to put a little fuller, a cut in there where the insert will go. Now, pay careful attention that the insert is tapered forward. And this is how I'm going to forge weld it in. Because knives are tapered towards the tip, and I want my insert to be within the layer the same thickness all along, I account for the future taper of the knife by making the insert thicker at the tip. Usually, you can trick one of your friends to help you out as a striker on this or that weekend. But if you don't have friends, you can use a hot cut hardy tool to do the same procedure, or hold the hot cut yourself and hit it with a hammer, carefully controlling the billet. All right. Tap it in, gently, harder. Okay, then as you can see, when I cut in the wrought iron, I left a little bit of wrought iron over here. That way, when I put in the flux, the entire body acts as a little bit of a tub, and the flux gets collected inside, so it doesn't leak out when I heat it up and begin the forge welding. Further, you might not see it now, but you saw it earlier. The high carbon bit stands about 3 to 4 millimeters proud of the wrought iron, because when I start forge welding it in together, it will sink in and the wrought iron will creep along the sides right along the high carbon. You will notice that during the forge welding procedure I'm constantly rotating my billet on the anvil. That is because the anvil itself sucks out the heat, so as you rotate your piece you don't let one side of it cool off faster than the other, and an even heat equals a good forge weld.
What am I doing?
Once the forge weld is complete, I still rotate my billet on the anvil as the striker assists me. The reason for that being is that the anvil surface is very flat, while the hammer surface is not quite as flat. And if I will not rotate my piece on the anvil, the central insert will travel with respect to the surfaces being hit. But if I rotate my billet, the center stays right where it needs to be. My wrought iron is already welded to the high carbon jacket and relatively drawn out. Wrought iron has natural strands, so if this is my little billet, like that. Wrought iron inside of it has these strands, very much like wood. Some go like that, some go like that. And my high carbon looks like that inside. Right? So, a good knife needs a tip. What I will have to do is cut it like that, when my high carbon goes all the way, and then I will forge the tip down like that. That way, and this is very important, and this is why exactly you're supposed to forge these rather than TIG weld the pieces. The natural grain of the wrought iron will follow the geometry of the knife. And my high carbon tip will follow my cutoff in the knife. This is the result I'm supposed to get. Now, erase this all. Let's imagine I would have used a modern method where I would have just taken a square bar, TIG welded all the way around my high carbon jacket, forge welded it, and then ground my knife to shape. The natural steel grain would not have followed the edge, and that usually is a sign of lazy craftsmanship. The entire simplistic beauty of making San Mai knives is exactly the fact that every single procedure is still seen in the final stage. So you can pick up an artisanally made knife and look at the exact level of craftsmanship and skill that the smith had. The amount of care they had, the amount of ego they had, everything. Because these knives come from a tradition that is ingrained in a context where artisanal craftsmanship is shaved with the Occam's razor twice, meaning everything extra, everything unnecessary is supposed to be removed, and only the simple craftsmanship remains. In fact, you can look at it the following way. The knife is not important. The knife is merely evidence of the skill of the craftsman. And it's the skill of the craftsman that you're supposed to appreciate in these objects. Okay. And where's my high carbon? Somewhere here. Okay, so my high carbon will follow all the way along. Because the preform for the knife is quite tall, when you forge the point the hard way, it will try to bend and curl on you. So I alternate between hitting it on the top and then straightening it out. Altogether it looks like a perfect set of motions where I just merely rotate the knife on the anvil using the hit and turn technique. To draw out the tag by hand, I move to the corner of the anvil, as the corner provides a more aggressive distribution of forces. The process consists of moving to the corner of the anvil, creating a sort of a harmonica type of design, and then moving to the flat of the anvil to turn it back straight. So the preform for the knife is now complete. As you might notice, it's very thick at this stage and a little bit wonky. So the next step is to actually form the blade. The forming of the blade will thin out the knife and draw out the bevel. So I expect it to be about this much longer than its current condition and this much wider. So about ½ inch wider and about 1 inch longer or so. Let's begin. Oh, those little cold sparkly. Did you see that sparkly? When working with composite materials like damascus, wrought iron, or bloomery steel, or any combination thereof, it is very important to induce the shape by hand using a proper technique. If you want to know more about beveling, check out another your edge video dedicated to this specific technique. So, the forging on the blade is now complete. Be mindful when you're forging knives. A sign of a good smith is that the edge is approximately 2 millimeters in the forging. No thicker, no thinner. You don't want a thick edge because it's a sign of lazy craftsmanship, and you don't want too thin of an edge because otherwise you'll have to take it down. I'll still have to pull out the tang just a little bit to create a double taper effect, and then we'll be on to the filing and scraping stages, which prepares the knife for the heat treat. When shaping the blade with a grinder, or in our case a file, it is important to start from the back and work your way to the front. That way you don't have the problem where you establish your line on the front, but once you're through the back, the whole shape is off, and then you'll have to alternate and lose a lot of your blade material. So the back should have a straight line from here to here, and then a clip. That's what we're going to do. After the profile work is done, it's time to move to filing and scraping of the flats, which prepares the blade for the heat treating procedure. When you're about to quench in water, it helps to put a very thin wash of clay on your surface. The reason is the clay evens out the cooling process, and if you want to know more about it, be on the lookout for an upcoming Your Edge video. One of the advantages of the San Mai construction is that after a water quench, you can hammer straighten your blade immediately on the anvil. Alright, and now the heat treating is completed. This is the knife blade you saw me make on camera, and this is how I make almost all my kitchen knives. These are at various stages of grinding, so let's complete all of them today. I will start with 60 grit on a platen and will get this knife almost to sharp. And then I will move on to higher grits and keep adding knives and get them all to the same condition. Let's begin. For the grinding process, it's optimal to use a platen with a very fresh belt. However, not everybody has the access to a platen, and platens haven't been around for a very long time anyway. So, you can buy a coarse water stone online and use that for your entire grinding and sharpening procedure. So, you start with a coarse stone, and just like as if you had a belt sander, you move through the grits up until the very final finish. In grinding a knife on the platen, it helps to keep your belts very sharp, so you have to use pretty much fresh belts, especially for the final grits, which are very high and might heat up your knife pretty fast. You have to always cool it off in a bucket of water or a barrel, and try to keep your edge up. That way you see if you're over grinding it or if you're going off angle. Now that the blade is fairly well polished, the last stage is the etch. A lot of people like bringing out the characteristic of the natural old wrought iron, and that is best achieved in two methods. One is the quick and easy etching method, and the other one is the long and arduous polishing process done with natural stones. For the sake of clarity, we're going to use the etching method. Alright, so the forging, grinding, heat treating and etching on the knife blade is complete. And what makes a knife really function is the ability to hold it when you use it. So here I have some stabilized Russian ash, stabilized Russian Karelian birch, a silver washer, and the silver washer only goes on this knife. The other ones will be a little bit simpler. So the key about these knives is that they look simple, and you cannot hide your problems when you're making something really quote-unquote plain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2-part epoxy. Fortunately enough, I only need a little bit of it. Here I have a little bit of forged scale. Some of this forged scale probably came from forging this knife, to make the epoxy dark, so that if there's a little bit of a gap, so on and so forth, it will fill it and make a nice little thin dark layer. So let's mix the epoxy. Make sure to wipe the excess epoxy on your clothing. Just a little bit on this nice tang. Doesn't need much, but it needs some. This goes in like so. The washer, and then we'll put too much epoxy in there. The maximum it needs is some of this action. Right? So, a penny saved is a penny earned. Like so. Like so. And we can now start removing our tape.
Have you heard of the freshwater octopus?
No.
It's an Oregon tree climbing octopus.
Okay. Where's this going?
It's an endangered species. It lives off of DMT.
Oh, okay. This is the most enlightened creature in the world, besides Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan's fucking amazing.
Well, that was fun and tasty. If you're not into making knives but want to have one, go to thatworks.shop where you can purchase one of these knives made by myself as well as Matt. Check out our other merchandise like t-shirts, stickers, so on and so forth, some hammers, and thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video once again. If you want to learn more techniques from other artists, click on the link below. Skillshare provides a plethora of other artists with other various crafts where you can sit at home and learn how things are done. And as always, keep honing your edge.
Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to tell us in the comments below what specific techniques you'd like to see us cover on the next Your Edge. And as always, we ask you to like the video and please consider subscribing to That Works.